As mayor, call this special emergency meeting of the Staunton City Council to order. I note that this meeting is being broadcast over the cable channel and being streamed live so that members of the public may hear our meeting. The meeting is also being recorded. At this time, I'd like to ask the Clerk of Court, Ms. Simmons, to call the roll for confirmation of those council members present for today's special emergency meeting.
Mayor Dahl.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kyer.
Aye.
Ms. Oaks.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Dr. Harrington.
Aye.
Ms. Mead.
Aye.
Dr. Curran.
Aye.
All members are present.
Thank you. I ask our city manager, Mr. Rosenberg, now to identify his location and those city and other officials or colleagues present with him at the location and the participation of anyone else during today's meeting by conference call.
Madam Mayor, I am in the caucus room in City Hall. I am accompanied by the City Attorney, Doug Gwynn, his paralegal, Robin Wallace, the Assistant City Manager, Leslie Beauregard, and the Clerk of Council, Faith Simmons. We are joined on the call by Lee Catlin, who is assisting the city with its communications effort in connection with the emergency. And I expect us to be joined later in the call by Dr. Laura Cornegie, the Director of the Central Shenandoah Health District.
All right, thank you. Before we begin the substance of our meeting today, please allow me as mayor to express to Dr. Curran and his family that we continue to think about them as they grieve the loss of Dr. Curran's father. I also convey on behalf of our city and city council members our appreciation to everyone in our city who is part of the collective effort to practice safe social distancing and to protect others. We all realize and respect that it is a time of shared commitment and some sacrifice that impacts individuals, families, employees, and businesses. We thank our own city employees and the school board employees who continue to serve during this time, particularly our first responders. We further send our heartfelt gratitude to all the healthcare workers who are laboring with great selfless dedication and sacrifice and some risk to care for others. These remain very challenging times for so many, including our citizens, other individuals and families, employees who are not able to work, and impacted enterprises in our city and elsewhere across our country and beyond. We are mindful that the worst could be ahead, although at the same time, in spirit, we remain optimistic that our communities and our country will ultimately prevail. As council members and the public are aware, yesterday by memorandum dated March 24, 2020, I called a special emergency meeting of our city council. This is our second special emergency meeting in just days. The call of the meeting today was also based on the COVID-19 outbreak, taking into account the national, state, and local declarations of emergency and the Virginia governor's actions just yesterday that orders a closure of schools for the rest of the year and the closure of some establishments, and the need and desire to be updated, to plan, and to assure the continuity of our local government structures and operations. Please let me mention that in calling this meeting, notice reasonable under the circumstances of this meeting has been given to the public contemporaneously with the notice by memorandum provided to members of City Council. Also, let me highlight and have reflected in the meeting minutes that this meeting is being conducted by electronic telephone conference call, given that it's believed at this moment that the catastrophic nature of the declared emergency and disaster makes it impracticable or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location. and the purpose of the meeting is to address the emergency. We all acknowledge that this situation includes a lot of uncertainty and changing understanding almost day to day as our national and state leaders learn more about COVID-19 and its effects and how it might be addressed. I ask the Clerk of Council to attach and incorporate as part of today's meeting minutes the March 23rd, 2020 memorandum by which I called the special emergency meeting. I also note that we have a focused agenda. It is focused on the emergency. Other usual elements of our City Council meetings are not included today, given this special emergency meeting. I ask that everyone do their best to keep that focus. Given that we are conducting this meeting by telephone conference call, with the meeting being live streamed on the city's website and broadcast over the cable system as it occurs, I believe it merits reminder of a few special requests as we undertake this meeting in this unique format. First, I emphasize the request that each speaker speak loudly and slowly and self-identify each and every time so that it will be clear who is speaking before the remarks are made. Second, please pause after each speaker to allow a brief interval between that speaker and the next speaker.
I already did once. Thanks.
Third, if for any reason a participant cannot clearly hear the speaker or must leave the meeting before it is adjourned, please let us know. Fourth, I ask everyone's patience because without being in the same room, it is likely, as we learned at last week's meeting, that a speaker may not realize that another speaker is continuing. Again, we may unintentionally step on each other's words, so it's fine if we need to have the speaker repeat or clarify. We'll take whatever time is necessary so that everyone is clear about what is being said and by whom. At this time, I'll turn to the City Manager, Mr. Rosenberg, to help lead our review, discussion, and possible actions now and in the future. Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me first ask, I heard somebody add to the call, and I don't know if that was Dr. Cornegie adding.
No, that was Opie on the second phone. So.
Okay. And do you have a better connection now?
I do.
Vice
yes.
Mayor Kier?
I most certainly do. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Very good. Let me say to all of you first that Dr. Cornegie is on a tight time schedule, as you can imagine. So when she does join the call, I'm going to interrupt wherever we are in the meeting and allow her the opportunity to provide an update to you so that she can then move on with her schedule for the remainder of the day. With that in mind, I first would like to take a few minutes and provide an update to you of the actions that we have taken in the days since the Council's meeting last week to respond to the emergency. We commenced and have since terminated curbside pickup service at the library. The decision was made within the last day to bring to an end the curbside service based on guidance that the library had received from the American Library Association and concerns about the survivability on the virus on materials that were being borrowed by patrons. And so I believe I have forwarded to you a communication sent by Sarah Scrobus outlining the library's push to provide support for digital services and to help patrons utilize those services. Last Wednesday, after your council meeting, we announced the discontinuation of parking fees for the Johnson Street and New Street parking garages and the Wharf parking lot. And we also, at the same time, announced the discontinuation of water disconnections on delinquent accounts so that people have access to clean water during the virus outbreak. And Mr. Gwynn is including those items for formal action by council at its meeting on Thursday, March 26th. But you can be assured that we have implemented the direction from council and that those parking facilities are available at no cost. and that water disconnections have terminated. On March 19th, which was last Thursday, we locked the baseball fields in Gypsy Hill Park. We became aware that there were actually youth league teams that were conducting informal practices on the fields, and in an effort to discourage that activity, we locked the entrances to the fields. And I'll touch on that subject of the parks in a little bit more detail further in my presentation. On Friday, March 20th, we convened our internal response team, and we will do so again this coming Friday for an exchange and update among members of the team. Yesterday, we closed playgrounds at Booker T. Washington Community Center, Montgomery Hall Park, and Gypsy Hill Park, with the closure presently effective through April 15th, which is the same date that we have utilized for the other facility closures that have been implemented to date. We also closed to the public for an indefinite period City Hall and the Irene Givens Administration Building in Montgomery Hall Park. And that was accompanied by a renewed push to get as many city employees in a capacity to work from home as possible. Public Works, where a glass partition provides protection to employees, remains open for the public to conduct business and to make utility connections and payments. And I wish to reiterate that all of these decisions about city facilities continue to be made based on guidance from Dr. Cornegie with the Virginia Department of Health. Yesterday, in addition, we launched a new landing page to provide a virtual front door for city services during the crisis, which is part of a significant communications program to ensure the public is fully and timely informed. We will continue to make improvements to that front door in the days ahead. Also yesterday, the police department announced adjustments to its operations and suspended some programs, including its ride-along program and fingerprinting services. Our next steps may involve the golf course, which is currently closed for routine spring maintenance. When it reopens for public play, I expect at a minimum we will impose either a walking or one person per cart requirement. And I hear a caller has just joined. Is that Dr. Cornegie?
Yeah, it is, Steve.
Very good. Thank you. We're in the midst of our meeting, but I've informed council members that when you joined us, that we would take a break where we are and invite you to go ahead and provide an update to us of current conditions so that you can move through that and then on to your next obligation. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'd like to invite Dr. Cornegie to provide an update to council.
Great, thank you. We'll just update our numbers throughout the district. The dashboard on the VDH website is lagging a bit behind with our real-time counts. We currently have 2 confirmed cases in Rockbridge County, 4 confirmed positives in Harrisonburg City, 2 confirmed positives in Rockingham County. We don't have any positives in Staunton, Augusta, or Waynesboro. We're continuing to try to increase access to COVID testing. The commissioner sent out a Dear Colleague letter today that outlines easier access points for public health testing, which includes an online request form that providers can fill out. Our public health interventions continue to be close follow-up with confirmed cases and making sure appropriate isolation procedures are being met. All of our confirmed cases, we do daily follow-up with and provide public health recommendations for when they can come off of isolation. In addition, we're doing contact tracing for all of the positive cases. The contacts who are asymptomatic are told to quarantine for 14 days, and likewise, we do daily updates with all of those individuals and make recommendations should they develop symptoms, and make recommendations for the discontinuation of the quarantine period. So a lot of things, kind of being done in the background in terms of public health. If you look at countries that have been very successful with their response to COVID-19, South Korea is among them. And one of the things that they found most important was case identification and contact tracing, as well as the social distancing measures for the communities. So we're continuing with very active epidemiologic response. Most of our day-to-day health department functions have been pared down to our most critical functions so that we can make staff available for these important epidemiologic tracing. I think one of the phenomenon that we're getting is a lot of attention to the numbers on the dashboard, which, like I said, sometimes lag behind, what we're seeing because of the need to enter it into the computer database. One of the things that we really need to emphasize to the public is that, we want the public to have access to numbers for good situational awareness. However, we try our best to maintain the privacy of all of these individuals and only share details that may be most pertinent. We've been releasing press releases for first cases in areas, but really don't intend to do that for subsequent cases. Once our region, has one case, it's not at all unusual that there would be at least a second one that would pop up, and oftentimes the associated cases are even close household contacts of the first case. So I think, like I said, we've gotten a lot of requests for in-depth information about the cases, which we're not going to provide, but I think having an overview of what's going on in the area gives everyone that situational awareness that they need. And I think, at this point, regardless of whether you're seeing activity in your locality, our public health message remains the same: social distancing, hand washing, staying home when sick, respiratory etiquette, et cetera. One thing that did get stood up on the CDC website that may be helpful for folks is a coronavirus self-checker, and it kind of helps people walk through symptoms and kind of direct them, if they meet triggers for testing. So that may be one tool that's helpful for the public. But I think that's all the updates I had. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Council members, let's go down and just see if anybody has any questions. Vice Mayor Kier.
Excuse me, none.
Ms. Mead?
No, I don't.
Thanks. Dr. Harrington?
No questions, but thank you, Dr. Cornegay, for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Dr. Curran?
No questions.
Ms. Oakes?
No questions.
Mr. Holmes?
God, I got some questions. This is Terry Holmes. Does Tamiflu or any of those type of drugs have they been proven to have any effect?
Tamiflu is an antiviral that's used against seasonal influenza. I don't believe that they're looking at it for COVID because it's a quite different virus. They are looking at some antiviral medications that are currently used to treat HIV to see if they may be effective with COVID. They're also looking at some older anti-malarial medications to see if they have any effect in prevention. So they are looking at a number of options, but I don't think Tamiflu would be among them.
Well, they've also, with the anti-malaria drugs, haven't they had, initially they had some, what they thought were results, but then a lot of people started having other symptoms from taking it. Is that true?
I haven't really delved deep into the studies that they're doing. With these medications, there's lots of things that are being looked at. I don't think there's anything that's been identified at this point for wide use. But hopefully, there's a lot being done in all sectors to look for medicines to treat and prevent COVID-19, and also vaccine research.
And one other question is, if you actually do come down with this, once you start feeling better, how long are you not able to infect somebody?
We have specific guidelines for getting people off of isolation. Hoping that they'll be non-infectious, and it would be a minimum of 7 days from the onset of symptoms, plus 72 hours free of fever, plus improvement, in overall symptoms. So it's a little bit of a complicated resolution, but public health is working individually with cases, doing daily monitoring, and then recommending discontinuing of isolation when appropriate.
Does it do any good? Like, I have a restaurant, and I've been wiping everything down with bleach. I mean, just to, does it do any good to take like a thing you would use in your garden and spray it on the ground? Because I hear a lot of it is that you can track it into your house and stuff like that. If you go through an area where somebody had been because I get some foot traffic in and out of my business from customers. They come to the front door. We try to take it out to the car, but does it do any good to spray like mixture of water and chlorine or bleach on the ground or something periodically?
I've seen pictures of that being done in China. I'm not really sure of the utility for that. It's certainly very important to disinfect high touch surfaces, tables, door handles, etc. Those are things that people's hands are going to come into contact with. People then use their contaminated hands to touch their face, and that can be the chain of transmission from an object to a person. It's hard to imagine how there would be a chain of transmission from the ground to a person.
Well, I think what they were saying is, you just kind of track it into your house. If you take your shoes off or something like that, you end up touching your shoes, or that's just something I read, and it might not be. In these times you start reading all this stuff and you don't know what's true and what's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think, our current recommendations are definitely, decontaminating those really high touch surfaces that your hands are going to frequently come into contact with. I don't think there's anything wrong with, providing disinfection to other surfaces. They're just much less likely to be, transmitting disease.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Cornegy, for taking time to give us an update. I know you're really busy, so thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you all for your help with these public health efforts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, so we'll go back to Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to remind members of council that the meeting is being live streamed on both the website and on the cable television station. I had just begun to share with you possible next steps that we may take. One such step may involve the golf course, which is currently closed for routine spring maintenance. When it reopens for public play later this week, I expect we will impose at a minimum either a walking requirement or a one-person per cart requirement. We will also continue to monitor the use of other park facilities such as the skate park, the dog park, and basketball courts, and close them as conditions require, and especially if the governor issues a stay-at-home order. I'll stress that our purpose is to provide open space for individual recreational activity. And consistent with guidance from public health authorities, residents should get out, get fit, and get home. What we've seen, especially on the nice days, is that the parks have been overrun and that individuals have not been conscious about practicing social distancing. And to the extent areas within the parks are drawing that kind of activity, we will consider further closures on a case-by-case basis. Before we move on, I am happy to answer any questions that council members have about actions that we've taken or that we may take in the coming days.
Council members, do you have any questions? And we'll start with Ms. Mead.
No, I do not.
All right, thanks. Dr. Harrington?
No, I don't.
Thanks. Dr. Kern?
No questions.
Thanks. Ms. Oaks?
Yes, one question for Steve. Steve, the bathrooms in the park continue to be closed. Can you talk about that for a little bit on why the bathrooms are closed?
Sure. So we made that decision again on the basis of use on some of those days, in particular, very nice days where the crowds at the park had become so large because nothing else is open for recreational pursuits. It became impossible for city staff to maintain the cleanliness of the restrooms to a standard that we would normally require, and in the current environment, there's a need for even a heightened level of cleanliness and sanitation. And so because we are unable to maintain them to the standard that's necessary, we made the decision to close the restrooms. And that decision is consistent with what I'm suggesting, that all of the guidance that we've received from public health officials is that this is not a time of vacation. It's not a time for a day in the park. The parks remain open and available to the public so that they can get out and they can have a level of activity and get in some exercise and then return home, which is the guidance that has been provided to us at all levels of the government. And so I think the idea is that people, for the amount of time that they will be in the park, hopefully will not have a need for a restroom facility.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, this is Terry Holmes. So we have, I guess for all of our first responders, they have all the stuff they need as far as gloves and masks and everything like that, don't they, Steve?
That's correct, and we'll be covering some of that in the daily update that comes out at the end of the day today.
And one other thing too, I still see people hoarding stuff at the stores. I know there's probably nothing we can do about that. It just seems really, you go and you can't find a loaf of bread or meat or sprays, and people in the store tell me that they're filling the shelves and then it's gone. I mean, it just seems like that just really aggravates me that people are that greedy or whatever. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
I appreciate
Mayor
the concern. I appreciate the concern, Mr. Holmes.
Okay, that was it.
All right, Vice Mayor Kyer.
Excuse me again. Yes, Mr. Rosenberg, I'm concerned, and we talked a little bit yesterday about what we can do for local businesses. I know we've talked about possibly the meals and lodging taxes, but there are so many other small businesses, and a small business owner, if they shut their shop, cannot apply for unemployment, to my knowledge. And even though we're looking at how this affects our reserves, these are the people that are bringing the taxes into our coffers, which fill those reserves. And I'm wondering if we can't come up with something. I know we've got the Staunton Creative Community Foundation is doing loans to $5,000, I believe it is. And I think they were looking at a small percentage or interest rate. I have seen where Harrisonburg and Waynesboro are doing the loans at 0% and utilizing the Staunton Creative Community Foundation, and also the Small Business Administration doing loans from $5,000 to $100,000. If we can assist with this, how can we get this information out? And I'm asking because I, of course, have clients of mine that are small business owners, and they're actually all over the state, and I'm getting calls that my doors are closed. I have no income, and I'm having to make some really tough decisions personally for my company. So what can we do as a city to help defray those costs or help even put dollars into our small business owners' pockets to help them survive through this storm?
Vice Mayor Kyer, I can tell you that we have been publicizing the availability of the Small Business Administration and Staunton Creative Community Fund programs in our communications program. That information has been included. I spoke today with Billy Vaughn, our Economic Development Director, about what other measures we may be able to take in order to assist local businesses, and I've asked him to consider that, and later in this meeting I will share details with you about recommendations that we're prepared to make for Thursday concerning trust fund taxes, the meals tax, and the transient occupancy tax. And perhaps on Thursday I'll have some more initial thoughts to share with you from Mr. Vaughn, but it's certainly, in addition to our publicity surrounding the SBA and SCCF programs and the relief that I'll describe to you later in this meeting, the subject of what we can do to further assist businesses is front and center before us, and I hope to have some further suggestions for you, if not on Thursday, subsequently.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe that was everybody in terms of questions. So at this time, we can go on to the consideration of adoption of uncodified emergency ordinance, and I believe that's going to be Mr. Gwynn.
Good afternoon. This is Doug Gwynn. You should have near you or before you, maybe on your screen, a draft ordinance that we call uncodified. It's uncodified because it will not actually be put within the numbering system of the city code. It's an emergency ordinance because the nature of what we are experiencing constitutes an emergency and a disaster, and the ordinance would have actually not only immediate but some retroactive effect. The ordinance has its origins and authority from a Virginia code provision that authorizes localities to adopt emergency procedures to assure what's called the continuity of government. In the case of an attack or a disaster, this situation falls within the category of a disaster. So this ordinance, while fairly long and ponderous, seeks to accomplish several things. It seeks to recognize the circumstances that we're operating under. It seeks to suspend some rules, adopt some new rules that are expedited rules to allow the local government to work without the necessary crossing every T and dotting every I that you experience at each of your meetings and with the call of each of your meetings, and so do other public bodies like the school board, the planning commission, the historic commission, and other city-related public bodies and officials. It also ratifies the actions that the city manager has already taken and directs him to take steps to implement what the ordinance contains. And it puts a cap on how long these emergency procedures and this set of expedited processes will last at 6 months or such longer time if, for example, we were to have a special session of the General Assembly, and the General Assembly would provide that the emergency procedures could be for longer than 6 months, or would give localities even greater power to deal with what you're dealing with now. That's essentially an overview of what the ordinance does. I'm glad to walk you through the recitals, which is essentially the history of what brings us to this point. I'm glad to walk you through each of the sections if you'd like. But in essence, what it does is it frees local government to continue to conduct its operations without some of what people would call the red tape, but yet at the same time assuring that the public has access and even participation in a different way when it comes to meetings of public bodies. You'll see in the ordinance that alternative means of hearing from the public, alternative means of having the public observe or hear your proceedings are essentially premised on the use of electronic communications or other web-based platforms such as social media, which the city is using extensively right now. You have questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. My recommendation is that the council consider adoption of the ordinance that was drafted and provided to you at approximately 11:45 this morning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gwynn. So we'll check for questions. Dr. Harrington, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Dr. Curran?
No questions on the ordinance.
Ms. Oak?
No questions.
Mr. Holmes?
Surprisingly, no questions.
I'd be
Vice
glad to
Mayor
have your
Carr?
questions, Terry.
I just wondered if Doug had socks on.
Vice Mayor Carr?
No questions.
Ms. Mead?
I have no questions.
All right, it appears that no one has questions about this, and I think Mr. Wynn's given us a good overview of it, and it's my understanding that this will be posted on our website if it's adopted. So I would entertain a motion at this time.
Mayor Dahl,
Ms. Mead?
I move to adopt an uncodified emergency ordinance re-ratifying and reaffirming the declaration of a local emergency and disaster due to the novel coronavirus, implementing emergency procedures to ensure continuity of government, ratifying and affirming the city manager's authority and exercise of authority and discretion in taking actions in the best interest of the city, and authorizing the city manager to take actions to implement the provisions of this ordinance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second. Jim Harrington.
Terry Holmes.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? And I won't go through everybody's names, but if anyone has any comments, questions at this point, please speak up. Hearing no one, I would at this time ask for Ms. Simmons to call the roll.
Mayor Dahl,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Oates,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Dr. Harrington,
Aye.
Ms. Mead,
Aye.
Dr. Curran,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Next, we'll move on to other matters relating to the emergency and disaster. Mr. Rosenberg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 5 items that I'd like to cover with Council. The first of those concerns the subject of relief for local businesses. And I'd like to provide an update to you and let you know what you can anticipate on Thursday during your regular meeting. On Monday of this week, we had a meeting here which included the Commissioner of the Revenue, Maggie Reagan, the City Treasurer, Rick Johnson, City Attorney Doug Gwynn, Paralegal Robin Wallace, Chief Finance Officer Phil Traer, Assistant City Manager Leslie Beauregard, and me. And in that meeting, we arrived at a consensus to recommend to Council relief related to both the meals and transient occupancy taxes. That relief would take the form of changes to the late payment penalty and interest on delinquent taxes. Both of those, which are currently at 10%, I believe, would be reduced to 0%. That adjustment would apply to taxes collected from customers during the period from February 1st of 2020 through May 31st of 2020 and would continue until June 30th at 0%. As of July 1st, 2020, the late payment penalty and interest rate would revert to 10%. So for the taxes attributable to that period and collected from customers, if, for example, a business failed to pay the meals tax on March 20th, until June 30th, there would be a 0% late payment penalty and there would be 0% interest. And the effect of that would be to give them until June 30th to make the payments. And if they didn't make the payments, then the late payment penalty of 10% would be imposed, and interest at the rate of 10% would accrue. Now, the other requirement will be that businesses responsible for the payment of these taxes will be required to continue to file their monthly returns so that the city has a record of the liability that is incurred by the businesses. So we are ready to ask Mr. Gwynn to prepare an ordinance that captures these concepts for your consideration on Thursday during your regular meeting. I'd be pleased to answer any questions on that subject.
All right, council members, let's see who might have a question. Dr. Curran?
No question.
All right, Ms. Oakes? Ms. Oakes, do you have any questions?
I'm sorry, my phone's going in and out. So the fees are strictly for late payments when a business would pay the tax late, they would assess the 10% fee. That's being waived until what date again?
Through June 30th.
When they have to have it paid through June 30th. Okay, that's also 0%. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
They would, in order to avoid a late payment penalty or interest, they would have to pay all taxes that had accrued during the period by June 30th.
Okay. All right, so they're going to need to pay by June 30th their taxes to avoid any sort of late fee or interest. Is it possible to, and again, I know that we're dealing with the state and there's a lot of regulations involved, but is there any way to potentially forgive any taxes, or taxes themselves on the meals and transient for a certain amount of time, just to forgive them altogether, which we can discuss more on Thursday?
We have not looked at specifically at our authority to provide for such a waiver, Ms. Oakes, but given the fiscal environment in which the city finds itself, and you'll learn more about that on Thursday, it would not be our recommendation that council consider an outright waiver of taxes for any period of time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Holmes?
Steve, along the same line, is there any way that they could pay these taxes back in payments without having a fee on them? I'm not saying to not have them pay them or to forgive them, but just, as it starts up in July, they'll start paying their tax on time. But the stuff that they didn't pay between now and July, is it possible if they didn't pay that money that they could just pay it back without us charging them any interest? I don't know if that would be a possibility. Because even if they start that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Council could certainly consider extending the 0% rate on the interest for a longer period of time than we are recommending. But it is our recommendation that the action taken by council provide only for the effective waiver of the interest through June 30th. So if council wished to extend that to July 31st or to August 30th, I think it certainly could do so. but we felt that this was an appropriate mechanism for relief, and in fact, it's more generous than what we've seen in some other localities.
Okay,
Mayor.
Vice Mayor Kyer, do you have any questions?
No other questions.
Ms. Mead?
No, I have no questions.
Dr. Harrington?
Yes, just on the matter of extending the period of relief, it would seem to me that between now and the end of June, we would know more than we know now about the conditions that might lead us to make a decision like that, and that any consideration of such an action ought to be delayed until later in the month of May or early June, so that we would have more data on which to base such a decision. For now, I'm happy with the formula as it's been laid out by the city manager.
And Dr. Harrington, I might add that after the passage of some time, not only will we know more about the broader economic impact of the emergency, but we will also know have a better sense of the fiscal impact on the city and what room we may have to provide for further relief.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. That's my only comment, Mayor Dahl.
All right, and I will just add to that I think these time frames are reasonable relief right now because these are taxes that are actually paid by the consumer and are collected for the city or the state, and I agree that we can then review it as time passes. We'll have a better understanding of how long this crisis is going to continue and the fiscal impacts. So, Mr. Rosenberg, do you need any additional information in order to have this ordinance created? Well, Mr. Nguyen's going to write it, but
Madam Mayor, I would simply let me handle the next step this way. Let me ask if there are any members of council who object to our proceeding with the preparation of an ordinance on the terms that I've described. I think I have my direction, Madam Mayor.
All right. And so, do you have other matters?
Yes, I have 4 other matters to share with council. I'd like to speak for a moment or two about this Thursday's meeting. We are moving forward with plans for an in-person meeting on Thursday. As has been noticed in the regular course of business, so we will have a work session and regular meeting as normal. We will be implementing appropriate social distancing measures. Those measures will include moving the work session to council chambers, seating council members throughout the council chambers along with the limited staff who will attend, and providing seating to any members of the public who attend in the first floor hallway only, where an audio feed is available. And I would note for those listening online or on the cable television station that, as is customary, the work session and regular meeting will both be streamed on the website and on the cable television station. And I will continue to update members of council concerning any further developments related to Thursday's meeting. May I answer any questions about that? Moving on then.
Sorry, I have a question. This is Eric Curran.
Yes.
So, is the reason why we're doing the meeting in person because state regulations require us to do so?
This is Dr. Curran.
Yes.
Dr. Curran, this is Doug Gwynn.
Yes.
It's my view as legal counsel that counsel could either elect to have the meeting by electronic communications or in person, but having said that, with social distancing measures put in place, the statutory criteria are, is it impracticable or is it unsafe? And there is an argument that if social distancing measures are put in place, like Mr. Rosenberg has described, that there is a better case to have the meeting in person rather than by electronic communications. But I want to emphasize that there is a sustainable basis under either scenario. I did observe that I believe the Harrisonburg City Council is meeting tonight in person. And each public body has to make this assessment for itself based upon not only national and state considerations, but also local considerations and considerations of any particular requirements or conditions of its members or members of the public. It's a very subjective determination, no doubt.
Are there any other council members who have a question or comment about this? Okay, if not, Mr. Rosenberg, what else do you have?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to talk for a moment about the public hearings that are scheduled for Thursday evening on the proposed water and refuse collection rate increases. Those have been noticed and scheduled for Thursday's meeting. We have been contemplating their deferral to Thursday, April 9th, which is the date on which the public hearing on the budget is scheduled. If we were to defer these public hearings, we would actually find ourselves in a place that's consistent with our practice in prior years when all of these public hearings are conducted on the same date. So in prior years when we have had a rate increase, we have scheduled the public hearing on the rate increase on the same date as the public hearing on the budget. Our thought and our hope is that a deferral of these scheduled public hearings would actually result in the attendance at Thursday night's meeting of fewer individuals. And we could announce the deferral of the hearings to the public prior to the meeting and at the same time publicize the availability of the live stream on the internet and cable television for those who are interested on April 9th. I would invite your discussion on this issue of whether to defer the public hearings or to continue them as scheduled.
So, council members, we'll go down and see if anybody has any, what their thoughts are on deferring or not deferring these two public hearings. Ms. Oakes?
Did we lose Andrea?
I don't know.
I'm in and out. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm in and out. Defer.
Mr. Holmes?
I agree with Andrea, defer. Well, will the people have any possibility to respond over the net, or if they're not in person, will they? Because I mean, if they can just hear us, they can't really voice anything. And then I guess we're just hoping that by the time we do this in April, things will be a little bit better.
Well, that's one possibility, Mr. Holmes. Additionally, the ordinance that you've just adopted allows for the sort of alternative input that you have inquired about, and if we were to defer until April 9th, it would give staff more time to develop and be ready to implement those alternative means of receiving public comment.
Well, I'm for deferring until that date then.
Vice Mayor Carr?
I would agree to defer.
Ms. Mead?
I defer to Thursday, April 9th.
Dr. Harrington?
I agree. Let's defer.
Dr. Curran?
Yes, I also agree. Let's defer.
Okay. All right, so we'll defer.
So let me just explain to you all that the items will still be on your agenda on Thursday night for action, and that action will be to formally introduce the items. And between now and Thursday, Mr. Gwynn will develop some guidance so that that action can be taken in the best way possible to affect the deferral of the public hearings to April 9th. The next item that I'd like to share with you is to invite Lee Catlin, who has been patiently on the line with us, to provide to you an update concerning our communications program with respect to the emergency. Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. Mayor Dahl and council members, I quickly would like to provide highlights to you of our communication efforts since the meeting last week. First area I want to mention is staffing capacity. We have created a communications team to make sure that we have the right experience and the right technical skills on hand to cover everything we need to cover. So we've got Morgan Smith from the city manager's office, Zach Henry from the IT department, and Katie Campbell from the tourism department, who are working together with me to make sure that we can do everything that needs to be done. Those staff members are cross-training each other and making sure they all have the appropriate credentialing to make sure that we can cover 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as necessary, and also that we can back each other up for the critical skills that we need to make sure that the communications are staying on track. I think we're mindful not only of being able to maintain the current level, but also recognizing that there may be a need to really ramp up for more urgent communications, as we have seen in some communities. We want to make sure that we're ready to do that. The critical functions that we're making sure that we have the coverage and the training to maintain include the daily media summary that's been going out. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, along with emergency press releases that we may need to get out as necessary, the e-news subscription list, the social media accounts, and the website updating. I mentioned we have implemented the daily news summary that we talked about with you last week, and I'm hopeful that you all are receiving that. If for some reason you're not, please let us know, and we'll double check that. That summary is going out every afternoon in the form of a press release, an e-news blast to the subscription list, and also being posted on the website. Mr. Rosenberg mentioned that we have launched the new website landing page to serve as an information summary and direct access to staff and to services for residents and businesses in Staunton. He mentioned, and I will stress that that's a work in progress. We are continuously going to be updating and expanding that to provide as much direct access and functionality as we possibly can. You all mentioned earlier, and I want to let you know that the business resource area of the website is something that we're very focused on as well. So hopefully over the coming days, you'll see additional information about making sure that businesses can get connected to the resources that are available to help them. Right now, Zach and Morgan are actively working with our department-level content editors to standardize information and the procedures throughout the site. We realize that people who do business frequently with the county may enter the website at the department level and not come through the front page. So we want to make sure each department website is standardized and informative and getting people where they need to go. Just real quickly to give you some numbers, since March 9th, the City of Staunton Facebook followers have grown 114 for a total of 6,413. The e-news subscribers have grown 91 in that time period for a total of 599. And the Twitter feed right now is reaching 1,372 people total. So I know you've got a busy agenda, so I'll stop there. But if there are any thoughts or suggestions or concerns, I hope you'll either share them now or feel free to get in contact with me in the future.
Thank you so much. Council members, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Mayor Dahl, this is Brenda Mead.
Brenda Mead.
This is Brenda
okay.
Mead. I just want to say that although the situation is very challenging and difficult, it sounds like these best practices that we're developing will be useful to us in the future as well.
All right. Are there any other comments? If not, Mr. Rosenberg, do you have other items?
I have one more item, Madam Mayor. Before I move on to that, let me just express my appreciation to Ms. Catlin and Morgan Smith, Zach Henry, and Katie Campbell for the great work that they're doing in maintaining the open channel of information to the public. It's been very helpful. Before I share my last item with you, it occurs to me that I overlooked in my recap probably one of the most significant measures that we've taken thus far, and that was when the business day began this morning, it was with City Hall closed to the public, along with the Irene Givens administration bill. I guess I did mention that. I'm sorry. So moving on to my last item, then I earlier forwarded to each of you an email communication from the CEO of Augusta Health. I had previously been contacted by a representative of the hospital to share with me the news of the establishment of the Staunton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro private-public partnership for community planning for COVID-19. And this is a group that is being convened by Augusta Health to address the potential needs within the region in the context of the public health emergency. The first meeting of that group is tomorrow. It includes representatives of Augusta Health, the 3 localities in the region, Shenandoah Valley Social Services, and a few additional local community organizations. I will be participating in the meeting, and Leslie Beauregard and Fire Rescue Chief Scott Garber are planning to join me. And with that, Madam Mayor, I have nothing more to share with Council.
All right, thank you. Let me go down through the council members and see if anybody has anything else to add. Vice Mayor Kyer?
No, nothing.
Ms. Mead?
I would just wonder if Andrea Oakes could provide an update on the Community Foundation COVID-19 response meeting today.
All right, Ms. Oakes?
Yes, this is Andrea. Absolutely. So to date, the Community Foundation has received donations and grants of $150,000 to be dispersed amongst outside agencies and working with the Staunton Creative Community Fund. They are providing Vice Mayor Kyer the $5,000 loans with a 2 to 3% interest, but even that's being reviewed. This has a term length of 12 to 36 months with an interest-only payments that are available. Also, Councilman Holmes, you had asked about the limitations of items being purchased in the different stores. Apparently, just initiated, Kroger, Martin's, and Walmart are limiting the number of packets of toilet paper, sanitizer, and meat that a customer can purchase. The meeting that Mr. Rosenberg just spoke of, there will be different agencies attending this meeting. I had mentioned earlier in our previous meeting that Augusta Health was looking at setting up a MASH-like unit at ExpoLand. This is in the works, and Mr. Rosenberg, you guys will be discussing that at your meeting. It looks like ExpoLand will be concerned about being able to keep the doors open and the lights on and whatnot, so they're going to be working with the Community Foundation on some funding for that. The school lunch program, the different school systems are still continuing to provide a pickup lunch, basically lunch in a bag that can be picked up, and that's being done with all 3 school systems. They're looking to expand the lunch program for Saturdays through the backpack program that is still trying to be organized. And that's pretty much it. Oh, the Comcast is working with the school systems. It's my understanding they're trying to work with the school systems on children that may not have access to the internet. Normally they would provide this at a $10 a month fee. These have to be homes that provide, the kids have free and reduced lunch provided to them. They're looking at expanding that to the point that they may offer it for free for 6 months. They're trying to work that out so the kids can have access to the internet. Everything else is still pretty much a work in progress, and another meeting is going to be established in the next few days.
All right, thank you. So, Dr. Harrington, do you have anything else?
No, I really appreciate that report from you, Andrea. I have nothing else to ask or to add.
All right, Dr. Curran.
I do have one question. Mr. Rosenberg, you're meeting tomorrow with the public-private group. I don't know if there will be any representatives from assisted living, senior care, or other facilities that are residential facilities for seniors, but I'm especially interested in the plans that such facilities have implemented to protect their especially vulnerable residents, not only from infection by people who are asymptomatic, who may be employees, vendors, or visitors to such facilities, but also as the seniors in these facilities are protected from contagion by asymptomatic carriers. How also are these facilities planning to provide services to their residents, and for those services to include not just the basic medical care and food and shelter, etc., but also some social services, mental health services, to make sure that folks aren't isolated? I realize that was a long question, but really the question concerns seniors who I know are especially vulnerable to contagion from asymptomatic people. How can we protect them? How can we ensure that they're protected and also make sure they're not lonely and forgotten?
Dr. Curran, I will be sure to raise those issues during the course of the meeting tomorrow.
Great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Curran. Ms. Oakes, did you have any additional questions, comments?
Yes. I did speak with business owners with restaurants and retail, and they are concerned about the fees and taxes. But, of course, we're going to speak on that matter further on Thursday night's meeting. One thing that surprised me that was a lot of interest amongst several business owners, the ticketing downtown. They would really like to see that suspended. But, again, we can discuss that further on Thursday. That's all. Thank you.
Did someone else have something to add?
Are they? This is Terry Holmes. Are they doing? They're doing the testing at the AMC station over in Waynesboro, right? Are they? Is that where they're doing the testing for the virus?
Mr. Holmes, I know what you're talking about. That's my understanding, that to assess or screen, or the focus of establishing diagnoses would be at that Waynesboro facility.
So that's the one that's right down from Big Lots.
Well, that I can't answer.
Oh. Okay. Well, they have a facility over there. It needs to be a car dealership. And I didn't know if that was the one. It used to be the Buick dealership, but I didn't know if that's where they were doing the testing and stuff like that. Because I'd heard they were doing like drive-by, like you go outside and they do a swab and then you just drive off, and then they let you know in like 5 days.
Terry, this is Brenda Mead.
Oh. Uh-huh.
I understand that they're still following the CDC guidelines, which means that it's not an open access testing service, drive-through testing service.
Uh-huh.
Someone who wants to access that test has to do it either through the health department or through their physician.
Right. Call ahead, and then set up an appointment.
I think
Holmes,
again it has to be.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Go ahead.
I was just going to confirm for Mr. Holmes that Augusta Health has established what they are calling the Waynesboro COVID-19 Assessment Center, which is located at 201 Lou DeWitt Boulevard, which is the former automobile dealership that you recall. And that center is established to see, evaluate, treat, and educate patients who are currently experiencing the signs and symptoms associated with the respiratory disease and COVID-19, fever, shortness of breath, and cough. So that is the location to which Augusta Health is encouraging individuals with those symptoms to present themselves for assessment, whether that involves a test or not.
Okay. That
All right,
answers my
so
question.
I think we've been down through the list, and I would like to first thank Ms. Oakes for the report on the Community Foundation, and to Ms. Catlin and our in-house team that's working on the communications, because that's so important, and you almost can't have too much. And thanks to all the city staff who are working diligently on this. And with no other business, this meeting is adjourned.